overseas, yes or no?
But well, I don't. The Prime Minister has not used the word veto. He did say in question period, BC government would need to approve. So that opens up.
So what happens if they don't?
No.
Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. Always a pleasure to bring Andrew Scheer, the House Leader of the Conservatives, the funniest man on Parliament Hill. He's here on Power and Politics with David Cochrane from the CBC, who is probably the biggest legacy media cockroach of them all, maybe in history. Let's take a peek. Is Andrew Scheer going to make David Cochrane laugh? Probably not. Watch David Cochrane's body language. He's very obvious. Let's take a look and a listen. Andrew Scheer is a one to watch. He is a funny guy. Let's take a peek.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
Well, also tomorrow, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is setting the stage for debate on his party's motion. The non-binding motion calls on MPs to support a bitumen pipeline to the BC coast and adjustments to the tanker ban. And it uses quite similar, if not identical, language to the government's recent memorandum of understanding with the government of Alberta.
Liberal members on one side of the country are saying they're against, while they're pretending in Alberta that they are in favor. So why don't they stand up in the House of Commons, look Canadians in the eye, take one position, vote for a pipe to the Pacific?
The Prime Minister and all of us and all Conservative premiers and most people in this country supports every part of that MOU.
Andrew Scheer is the Conservative House Leader, and he joins me now. Mr. Scheer, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks very much for having me.
What do you hope to gain from getting the government to vote on this tomorrow? What does it do to advance the push for a pipeline?
Well, I believe Canadians deserve clarity. You know, we've got Mark Carney that goes out and dangles the possibility of a pipeline in Alberta, and then immediately comes back and starts to talk down expectations. You know, he says these are necessary but not sufficient to get it built. There's all kinds of Liberal MPs saying that they won't support it. If we ever got to the point of things like looking at the moratorium on tanker traffic, that would require some kind of change of legislation. So I think Canadians deserve to know exactly where this government stands. Mark Carney has made a practice now of saying one thing to one group of people. When he's in Alberta, he'll to say positive things about it, but when he goes to other places, he says things like, well, you know, the Premier of British Columbia gets a veto, and necessary but not sufficient, and all kinds of confusing language. So tomorrow's an opportunity for Liberals to just clearly state, do they support a pipeline to the Pacific so we can export more Canadian oil and gas overseas, yes or no?
But well, I don't. The Prime Minister has not used the word veto. He did say in question period, BC government would need to approve. So that opens up.
So what happens if they don't?
No, I just want to quote him accurately. But these are not sufficient conditions yet for a pipeline, right? There's no proponent, there's been no consultation, there's no route, there's no Indigenous support. I mean, there is this MOU, but it is not at the sufficient stage, right?
Well, first of all, Mark Carney is becoming famous for this kind of Liberal wordplay where he says, oh, it's not a veto, but an approval is required. Well, we all know what happens when somebody is, when somebody says, well, somebody has to agree for it to proceed, well then withholding that agreement is in effect a veto. He has not ever said that even if the British Columbia government opposed it, that he would approve it anyway. Secondly, to your point, first of all, there are, on the previous Northern Gateway project. And I think it's important to kind of take a step back and say, how did we get here?
Sure.
On the previous Northern Gateway project, which would have opened up Asian markets to Canadian energy, there were lots of First Nations communities who would benefit and sign on to partnership agreements. What Mark Carney is saying when he says that these conditions are necessary but not sufficient, you're right, there's lots of things in the MOU that haven't happened yet. But what Mark Carney is saying, that even if all these things happen, it still might not proceed. So that's why there's just so much confusion around here. There's no confusion from other political parties. Don Davies and the NDP, very clear. They do not support a pipeline. The Conservatives, very clear. We want a pipeline built to put men and women in the energy sector back to work and get off of U.S. dependence in terms of a market. The Liberals, all over the map, very confusing. We just believe Canadians deserve clarity.
So why would Mark Carney spend political capital and time to sign a deal with Daniel Smith, who has not been a fan of Liberal governments, as you're well aware? He had a high-profile resignation from cabinet and former Minister Guilbeault, which is going to hurt him in parts of Quebec. The pipeline itself is an unpopular notion in the lower mainland of British Columbia, which could cost some seats to the New Democrats. And members of his Net Zero Advisory Committee have been resigning in protest of the rollback of environmental policy that's in this. Why would he do all of those things and take all of those hits if he wasn't serious about trying to get a pipeline to the Pacific coast?
Well, I believe that he understands that Canadians want to see some progress on this. Canadians overwhelmingly support exporting more of our oil and gas. Canadians definitely want to diversify our trading markets, but he doesn't believe in it himself. Remember, he wrote a book called Values, where he described himself on a very integral level, and he talked about his love of carbon taxes, his belief that we need to leave our natural resources in the ground. I mean, he talked about making people go through great hardship in the next few years. So I believe it's a case that, look, he can read the polls, he can see where the Canadian people are at, but he doesn't actually want to do it because he doesn't believe in it. So he's trying to do half measures. Now,
it's a lot of capital and effort to waste on something you don't want, though.
If I'm wrong, he could show up tomorrow and he can vote in favor of our motion and clearly say, I support a pipeline.
Right. Okay. Well, I want to play a clip. This is from a Calgary Liberal MP, Corey Hogan, who said that today that a yes or a no vote actually potentially makes the pipeline less likely because of the implications of it. Just have a listen to what Mr. Hogan had to say.
This is a motion that's designed to provoke and to divide, and the Leader of the Opposition doesn't seem to care that the motion actually makes less likely the thing he says he wants, which is a pipeline. If it's a yes vote, it might look like we don't take seriously our requirement to consult with BC and First Nations. And if it's a no vote, it might look like we're not serious about the pipelines.
I mean, is that not the net effect of what this motion does?
If the motion has that effect, then what effect does the MOU have?
Well, but the MOU has a language about, you've pulled out one specific section of the MOU, like the part about, consulting and engaging with First Nations, consulting and engaging with the government of British Columbia. You mentioned Northern Gateway. I mean, that was approved in 2014, but overturned by the federal court in 2016 due to a failure to consult with Indigenous groups after the report approving it with the 209 conditions was released, right? The concern there is that if you vote yes now, it looks like you're short-circuiting the consultation process.
First of all, on Northern Gateway, it was sent back to Cabinet with gaps identified. It was a political decision by the Liberal government to veto Northern Gateway, and Mark Carney said he supported that. So
right, but the legal precedent of it being overturned.
There were options available to the government to fill in those gaps. The Liberals made a political decision not to proceed and to kill the project, and Mark Carney said he supported that. If our motion does what that Liberal MP said,
Corey Hogan,
then what does the MOU do? The MOU is signed by the Prime Minister, signed by the government of Alberta. So,
but there's more to the MOU than is in your motion.
Yes, but I just think on that level alone, that remark was ridiculous. What we're saying in this motion is the essence of this. The reason why Mark Carney went to Alberta to sign this MOU was not to build other things. It wasn't built. He didn't sign an MOU to get a ring road built around Calgary or to make some other infrastructure announcement. It was an MOU to get a pipeline built. So what we're just asking Liberal MPs is to clearly state, do you support that in principle? Nothing in our motion contradicts any other part of the MOU. We lifted it right from the MOU, including the language on consultations for Indigenous Canadians. That is the essence of the MOU. That is why everybody got together to sign it. If Liberals can't even bring themselves to vote yes on that, what kind of a message does that send Canadians?
Right, but you can appreciate the delicate politics of trying to do this with the opposition of the government of British Columbia, the opposition of the coastal First Nations as a group representing a lot of the nations there in BC. I mean, they're coming here tomorrow for this debate because they feel Minister Hodgson wasn't clear enough in meeting with them. And now you've suggested it's ridiculous, the concerns that it would look like you're short-circuiting the need for Indigenous consultation. I mean, I appreciate the politics you're doing here, but...
No. Just because a Liberal MP says it doesn't make it true. The idea that having a vote on an MOU that the Prime Minister himself signed, that the essence of which was to get a pipeline built, in any way undermines the ability to proceed it's just laughable, just on face value. It's the Liberals that were being criticized for not doing proper consultations in advance of the MOU. So that's a problem that they have to explain.
No, I know. And I went through that with Minister Hodgson last week.
I think it's absolutely fair, after weeks of mixed messages and outright contradictions from the government, to bring the essence of the MOU, the point of the MOU, was to get a pipeline built, put that before all MPs so everybody can clearly state where they are. And as I said, all the other political parties are very clear on where they stand, and Canadians can judge them in the next election on their position. As of today, I can't tell you what the unified message of the Liberal Party is, because their MPs are all over the map.
But maybe there isn't a unified message of the Liberal Party is what I wonder, because...
I think that's worth Canadians to know too.
Sure, well, I think Minister Guilbeault's resignation made that kind of clear, and what we've heard from some of the BC MPs, I think makes that kind of clear. I think the Cabinet, though, is Eleanor Olszewski was here, the cabinet minister from Alberta, and I asked her directly, is this a government that is now fully committed to the idea of getting a pipeline? She said yes. So, I mean, I appreciate what's in the Prime Minister's book, and things are obviously very different, you know, right now. But since the signing of the agreement with Daniel Smith, beyond highlighting the conditionality of the MOU, that it requires a proponent, it requires consultation and a route and these things. What is it that is unclear from the cabinet's perspective?
Well, because even what you just said, there are conditions in the MOU.
Yeah.
No one denies that. What Mark Carney said is that the conditions in the MOU are necessary but not sufficient. What that means, if you actually just look at the meaning of the words themselves, that even if the government of Alberta does all of this, Mark Carney's still giving himself an out.
Do you see it that way, or do you mean that it's not
mean?
Sufficient until the government of Alberta does these other things? That's how I interpreted it, and getting the other partners potentially on board, or at least going through the consultation.
That's not what the words mean. I mean, if you want to sell me your house, and I say, okay, but on condition that you put a new coat of paint on the exterior and change the landscape, and you say, okay, so if I do that, you'll buy the house? And I say, well, maybe not. So if you don't do it, I definitely won't buy the house. But if you do it, it might not be enough.
Yeah, but that's a one-to-one transaction. This is a lot more complicated, right? So look, as a final point, representatives from the Coastal First Nations, the umbrella organization, and some of the nations that comprise it, they're going to be here tomorrow. Do the Conservatives plan to meet with them to find out their views on this? Because you know, they obviously are a key player in all of this, as the preferred route, if the Northern Gateway route is resurrected, is right through their territory.
I'd be happy to meet with them. I would point out that if there's a failure to get buy-in at this stage around the MOU from Indigenous communities, everything I've read is that failure lies with the federal government for not doing that. I meet with First Nations community all the time who recognize that the path for prosperity for First Nations community is in natural resource and extraction. And for decades, we've extracted Canadian natural resources and energy out of the ground to the benefit of First Nations community, to the benefit of all Canadians, to the benefit of everybody who uses a hospital or drives on a paved road. These are good things for Canada at a time when we need to be diversifying our trade off of U.S. markets. And so our vote tomorrow is to basically show Canadians that where every party stands. A Conservative government would offer the people of Alberta, the people of Saskatchewan, the men and women who want to work in the energy sector, Atlantic Canadians in Newfoundland, who see these natural resource extractions as a way to lift up the quality of life for their people. Our message is, we're not going to create hoops and hurdles and special rules and special exemptions. I mean, think about the kind of economy that Mark Carney is building here. He's not setting level playing fields where all projects are treated equally, all companies are treated equally, all workers are treated equally. He's giving him the selective power of enforcement. That's a very, very dangerous road to go down.
That's what C5 was, and you guys voted for C5, right? Because it allows for these limited exemptions for national laws. I mean, this is a piece of legislation that passed with Conservative votes.
Look, our preference, our strong preference, is to remove the liberal legislation that now even Liberals admit unnecessarily blocked big projects. They have admitted that with the need for C5 and with their arguments in this MOU. What we're saying is, what we would do is repeal the bad legislation for everybody, not just the favored few that the Prime Minister picks.
Right, but I mean, none of that, just as a final point, gets around the need to properly consult with First Nations, right? This is still a central challenge here, and you know, the Coastal First Nations support LNG. It's bitumen they don't support. That is still a central challenge. I mean, do you see a world where TMX just gets supercharged as a way to get more bitumen to the markets? Because David Eby is on board with that, and that's a much easier path than Northern Gateway.
There is well-established jurisprudence from court decisions on what proper consultation looks like, where the government can still proceed with a project. TMX is not the same as a deep water northern port, which opens up those lucrative Asian markets. Those U.S. tankers going down the coast off British Columbia have access to those markets. Canadians don't. We believe at this critical juncture where we need to be diversifying our trading partners, the government should be offering a clear and predictable path to get to a yes, not an MOU with extended timelines, with all kinds of conditions that even Liberals can't commit to supporting.
Okay, we got to leave it there. I've gone over time. Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer, we appreciate your time.
Oh, yeah. There's our man, Andrew Scheer. Is he the funniest guy, in your opinion, on Parliament Hill? What about David Cochrane? Is he the worst of all the legacy media hacks? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. We'll check you in the next video. Thank you for watching this one. Smash the like, hit subscribe. We'll catch you around here. Check out one of the other videos floating around. They're always interesting to watch. Catch you in the next one.
Anytime you hear Mark Carney talking about trade with the US or tariffs on Canadian exports, you should just say, who cares, change the channel, and tune him out, because that was his message to you. So you know what, Mark Carney, this part's especially for you. On behalf of the millions of Canadians you've let down and insulted, every time you open your mouth in Parliament, our message to you, who cares?